Hey everyone, it's Matt, and today is the last episode of The Last Laugh. Thank you for listening to one, some, or all of the over 300 episodes we put out over these past 6.5 years. But, I also have some good news. A new podcast will be appearing in this feed starting in early January. It's called Obsess the Podcast, and it will bring you new conversations with great guests like the ones we've been doing on The Last Laugh, but now with even more episodes per week, more pop culture coverage, more Daily Beast voices. And one of those voices is with me right now, the founding editor of the Daily Beast Obsessed, who will be a huge part of this new podcast, Kevin Fallon. Kevin, thank you so much for being here with me. And I just wanted to get a chance to tell people about what this new show is going to be. So, can you give us some more info? How are you feeling about it?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. We're going to be doing 3 episodes a week, which is a lot more than the 1 episode a week that I've been doing over this past, several years. So it's going to be a lot, and I'm really excited to get into it. And I think we're going to get to talk to a lot more people, and people of different parts of the entertainment industry and pop culture, not just comedians. So I think that's going to be really fun as well.
I know we're going to be ranting and raving about all the TV shows and movies and celebrity gossip that I know that everyone else is also thinking about all the time, like I am. And what I really hope is that it feels like we're all at brunch together, screaming about our opinions about the TV show that we just watched or that celebrity divorce that just happened and we all have opinions about. I think it's just going to be a blast.
Yeah, and this new podcast is going to have a new regular segment called Unmissable that breaks down the one piece of pop culture that you have to see on any given day. So it's really like whatever we are most excited about on that day, on that week, something that's coming out. And so with that in mind, I asked my guest today, Judd Apatow, for the one unmissable project from his career. Basically, it's like what people should see if they could only see one thing that he's made, and he has made a lot of stuff. And he also told me the one thing that he thinks people should miss, which was funny as well. So definitely stick around for those answers at the end of this episode. Kevin, is there anything else that you feel people should know before they start tuning into this new podcast in the new year?
Just that, for all of my many years of working at the Daily Beast, I've always thought of the readers as my best friends. And I'm so excited to actually get to talk to all of you. So this is going to be so much fun for me.
All right. So before we get into the interview today, I do also want to acknowledge that we taped our conversation before the tragic murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele. Rob was a guest on this podcast just a few months ago, and I am forever grateful that he took the time to speak with me about his work. He also appears in Judd's upcoming documentary about Mel Brooks, sharing the same incredible story he told me about the first time he met his father, Carl Reiner's comedy partner and lifelong friend. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to our episode with Rob, I encourage you to go back and check that out, along with the full archive of Last Laugh episodes, which will remain available on this feed. All right. Here we go. I really hope you enjoy this final episode. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you right back here in January. This is The Last Laugh. I'm Matt Wilstein from The Daily Beast, and today, after 6 years and more than 300 episodes, we are officially saying goodbye to this podcast. And I could not think of a better final guest than the man who brought the world Freaks and Geeks, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, This Is 40, and so many more films and TV shows that made me want to interview comedians in the first place. His new book is, fittingly, called Comedy Nerd. Judd Apatow, welcome back to The Last Laugh.
It's good to be back for the last time ever.
I know, it's crazy. This is your 4th time on this podcast. The first one I actually came to you in your office, and that was before we started doing everything, remotely. But it was good. I'm glad we got to do one in person.
No
video back then. That's new.
And now I gotta make my bookcase look good.
Exactly.
Gotta get the hair right.
Yeah, get that just right.
Maybe they're going to stream this on Netflix next, right? Got to get it all.
Yeah, that's the goal.
HBO,
Everything will be
Max, Netflix, Paramount Plus.
Well, I'm very excited to have you here. Barack Obama was our first choice, but you were our second. So I think we did pretty well.
He can't do everything, and then I get the pickings afterward.
No, but I do think you are the perfect last guest on this podcast, because not only have we talked several times and you've been a great friend to the show, but also because you famously invented the comedy podcast as a teenager, which people may or may not know.
Yes. I was going to say that the only long form interviews back in the day, if you wanted to like have a long interview with Richard Pryor or George Carlin, you'd have to look at Playboy magazine because they had the long Q&A article.
How easy was that to come by as a teenager growing up on Long Island?
It depended on how bad your porn addiction is, but usually your dad had a hidden stash or your friend's stepdad had a stack in the bathroom or something under hidden. And then you could go, hey, after I'm done looking at these ladies, I'm going to read a very long interview with Groucho Marx. And if you're a nerd, you enjoyed that kind of thing.
But instead, you started recording interviews with your comedy heroes for this radio station at your high school that may or may not have existed. Yeah.
No, we had a radio station. It's still there, WKWZ. And that's on Long Island in Syosset. And great man, Jack DeMacy, one of the teachers, ran it and just let us do whatever we wanted to do. And I had a friend, Josh Rosendahl, who was interviewing a lot of bands like REM back then in like the early 80s. And he said, well, you should try to interview comics. You like comics. And so I hunted down Steve Allen, the original host of The Tonight Show. And that was the first one. And then I would call people and go, I just did Steve Allen. And then get Seinfeld and then John Candy. Right? And it's always like the credibility of like, oh, I just did Sandra Bernhard. And then I'm able to get Harry Shearer. And so over the course of about 2 years, I did about 50 of those. And that became my education because I just would ask them all the questions about, how do you get in? How do open mic nights work? Where do you sign up? How do you write a joke? How much time do they give you? And, 50 hours of questions from a nerd.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely true of this podcast. The only way that I got any of the guests that I got is that Sarah Silverman, for some reason, agreed to be my first guest. And then after that, all I had to do was say, well, Sarah Silverman did it. And that was all I needed.
I had that with Alan Zweibel, one of the original writers from Saturday Night Live, who wrote so much of the great Gilda Radner material with her. And he took out his phone book and just gave me, Don Novello, Guido Sarducci's home phone number. And I just started bugging everybody. And, a fair amount of people said yes.
I like that. I mean, they could tell your passion for comedy because it's not like maybe they thought you were reaching new fans for them, but they seemed like they were doing it just because they could see in you that you really cared about this stuff.
I guess. I mean, I think that people just were not as busy back then. Like right now, everyone's asked to do 200 podcasts a year, but that's what it's like now. And back then, no one cared and no one ever wanted to talk to you about anything. So I think people were kind of excited to be interviewed because they weren't interviewed that often, especially if you were a road comic. Maybe you did some morning radio here and there, but very few people took you seriously and wanted to do a long questionnaire about your thoughts about comedy.
And you were sort of collecting practical information too, right? Like how to do this. Like there were some lessons I know that you've said that really stuck with you for years after you did these interviews.
Oh yeah, because I didn't know how anything worked in comedy. So I remember I talked to Harold Ramis and he talked about writing jokes for Rodney Dangerfield and for Playboy magazine. And I was like, wait, you can get money from a comedian you worship to write him jokes? Because I was a busboy and a dishwasher, at a comedy club. And I was really working hard to make my $4 an hour. And when someone said, yeah, Dangerfield buys jokes for $50 a joke, I'm like, what? If I could get him to buy 4 jokes, I can get $200. That's a lot of dishwashing hours. So it made me work really hard to try to figure out, some of these hustles to pay the rent while I was trying to do all this.
So I want to talk about your book that you put out this year as well, Comedy Nerd, which I absolutely loved. I think it's the perfect holiday gift for listeners of this podcast in particular, if you love comedy. I feel like it's sort of more of a coffee table book. I'm not sure it's supposed to be read cover to cover, but that's what I did because I am a comedy nerd and I really enjoyed it.
It's a coffee table in your toilet book. It's a restroom book. You can open to any page and there's something interesting to look at.
It does feel like your life as a hoarder really paid off with this book.
Yeah, I don't know why I was such a hoarder, but it was my instincts from the earliest days to really save and protect anything associated with show business. So if I had Phil Collins' autograph, I just treated it like the Shroud of Turin. You know, everything was like in rolls and protected in my closet. And, you know, my Doobie Brothers greatest hits signed by Patrick Simmons, you know, and I saved it and kept it. Like I never lost track of it. Like I still have all those things. And no one wants to look at it in my family. There's never been a moment when my kids were like, Dad, can I look through your autograph collection and see all your memorabilia? Like the lack of interest couldn't be higher. So it was fun for me to scan everything. And then, you know, then all the photos that the set photographers took on all the movies and hunted down all the articles and reviews and the notes from the studio and just weird pictures and ephemera from everything. And I basically laid out the whole book of that and then spent 6 months writing captions and essays explaining what it was. And it is the kind of book I wish existed when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything you came across that you just felt like you had totally forgotten about or that felt
That's what it looks like, the
surprising to
book.
you?
I forgot to plug it.
I love the cover, yeah.
Right? And that's me. That's my first headshot when I was like in seventh grade. I thought I'd be in McDonald's commercials. And then I got chicken pox and I was instantly like a freak because I got chicken pox and poison ivy at the same time after putting poison ivy up my nose to make someone laugh. And then look at this. I still have the pockmark. That's the pockmark that ended the acting career. And that's pockmark too. Yeah. Because I put poison ivy medicine on the chicken pox.
This is why you weren't a child star.
This is why you're not seeing me in front of the camera. Just that. And my friend Satoshi Fujita used to always just make fun of me and go, "You have a laser." Boo, boo, boo. And it made me think maybe I'm not attractive enough to be in front of the screen too much. But I'm glad the book is out there because now I can say to my family, see, the Hoarding was worthwhile. It led to a book. The book is for charity. The money goes to Fire Aid, which is for the people who were affected by the fires out here in California, and 826, which does tutoring and literacy programs for kids. So it was a perfect way to say to everyone, I am not crazy for having these stacks of things. I'm not weird for holding on to my 1992 Rolling Stone interview with Bono. You know, all hoarding is good.
The book really captures this golden age of movie comedies that you were such a big part of. And there's movies that you talk about in the book that were huge hits, and then there's ones that sort of didn't work at first and then over time have become beloved. Did you learn anything sort of going back in that and sort of why things worked out the way they did, why certain movies really connected and others, took longer to find an audience, anything like that?
I mean, it's hard to know how to interpret all of that, right? Because you make a movie and then you're instantly judged on two things: reviews and did people pay money to see it? And so you might feel like a failure in the box office, but you're kind of excited because you got good reviews. And then that's how you sleep at night. You're like, well, the reviews are good. And then other times the box office is good and the reviews are a little clunky. And sometimes they're both bad or both good. And you have to process it because it affects your next movie. Because are you coming from a place of the injury of the last release, or are you feeling kind of cocky from the last release? And every once in a while, a movie would come out and just eat it. And then you realize 20 years later, oh, that's like everyone's favorite one. And it just kind of kept bubbling up. And Walk Hard is one of those movies that, really did not open. And we just couldn't get anyone to think they needed to leave the house to see it. But then once it hit DVD and streaming, it's maybe one of the most popular of all the movies that we've done, which is also a good feeling because now when movies come out, you realize, oh, this is the beginning of a long journey for this movie. And a lot of movies I loved as a kid weren't beloved in the moment. Harold and Maude, one of the great movies of all time, did not do well in the box office and got some brutal reviews. And it's one of the best movies of all time. And so you have to have those thoughts in the back of your head so you don't go under the covers when you have a bomb and never make anything ever again. You have to go, maybe this is like Harold and Maude. And then you just try to work up your self-esteem to make another one.
Maybe the answer is Walk Hard, but is there one that is sort of the most gratifying to you that it has found an audience after not such a good initial reception?
Well, Walk Hard was definitely one that I really appreciate. Heavyweights. We made a movie about a summer camp for overweight kids, and Ben Stiller was the villain in it, and Kenan Thompson's in it. It's just a really, really sweet, funny movie, but so weird for a Disney movie. So Disney didn't know what to do with it. They didn't really try to sell it, and so it didn't do great at the box office. But now it's on Disney Plus, and people watch it like it's brand new. Like it's really in kind of a heavy rotation, and has been for years, where people talk about it like it's a new movie. And that's a funny one that I'm like, wow, I'm glad that held up, because it's a sweet, almost like a precursor to Freaks and Geeks, just underdog kids, getting crazy.
I think there are a lot of factors that have led to the big studio comedy not being what it was in your heyday and all these movies. One piece of the book that really stood out to me is when you talk about the sort of people you were working with in that world drifting apart and projecting your parents' divorce onto it, and sort of having that feeling of loss, or things changing, or people, going their separate ways. What was that like for you, in the moment when that started to happen? Yeah.
Well, that's like it is a circus life, entertainment. If you're a comedian, you're on the road, and you meet people in different clubs. You perform with different comedians at each show. When you make a movie, it's like summer camp for like 2 to 5 months, and then everyone goes their separate ways. If you do a TV show, you get really close, and suddenly you're canceled, which always felt to me like someone was just showing up to a friend group and going, never hang out ever again. You guys will separate. And I think as a child of divorce and just a sensitive person, that was surprising to me. Like, oh, this is a life of constant separation and abandonment issues. So I always wanted it to be like, oh, let's create a group and we could just do this together our whole lives, which doesn't make any sense at all. And it's kind of a miracle that we did so much together for so long. And we still do things together, just at a different kind of pace. But, I wanted it to be like, the cast of MASH, some TV show that was on the air for 14 years, and you just keep doing your thing. But everyone has their own careers, their own visions for what they want to do. And so obviously, like a rock band, Sting he's got to go solo at some point. But it's painful. And I think it's painful for everyone in the business, because sometimes, when people are together, you realize it's magic. Like when we did Freaks and Geeks, like, oh my God, this is really special. I can tell every day when we're shooting, the actors, the writers, the directors, the production, like we're in some crazy groove and this feels right. So when someone says like, all right, you're done, it's a devastating feeling. The only thing I can compare it to, sometimes I go, it's like if the Beatles were recording like Revolver and in the middle of it, someone just said, nah, stop.
Yeah.
You'd be like, wait, I think it's coming out good,
Yeah. I mean, Freaks and Geeks for me is just an all-time show. And I think it seems like a lot of your career has been trying to keep those people that you met and who got their start on Freaks and Geeks, working in different ways and encouraging them, and leading to, Knocked Up and Superbad and, Forgetting Sarah Marshall and all of these different projects. That was sort of you felt responsible for those kids in a lot of ways, right? Because they were kids when you hired them to be on that show.
Well, I definitely felt like, wow, a lot of these people aren't going to college because we're doing this show.
Right.
Like, because a lot of people were in like 12th grade or 11th grade, and they were at the moment where they had to decide what they were going to do. And there's certainly a part of me that felt like, I hope they're okay. Like, I hope they work after this. Like, we're doing our little show about, outcasts at high school, and people are moving here from other countries. And I believe in them and think they're incredibly talented and special, but that doesn't mean showbiz will work out for anyone. But I also thought our work hadn't been completed. So it was really fun for us all to go, what else can we do together? And to try to break down some walls in terms of, who could star in a movie, who could write a movie, who could direct a movie. And so many people really were so talented and put in a massive amount of effort to have the careers that they had and are having right now. And it's amazing. And it is astounding how much everyone has done. You know, it's a really special thing to go look at all the movies and TV shows and performances that came out of this one little place where everybody met and had some of their first jobs. It's like a weird little miracle. Like we just produced a documentary about this production of Godspell that happened in Toronto in the early 70s. And Stephen Schwartz comes down to Toronto to find a cast, and he just happens to pick like the future of Canadian comedy, and it's Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin and Gilda Radner and Martin Short and Victor Garber and Paul Schaefer, and then all those people just went on to amazing things. And this felt like that. Like, I don't know how it happened. You know, I think Paul and I and Jay Kazan were just looking for special people. And then Paul rewrote the script to them. So he had a vision for it. But we said, but now let's find the people and based on who they are in life, tailor it to them. And I think as a result of that, the cast was just, one of the, weird, legendary groups of people.
Well, and then the encouragement that they got from you and Paul Feig and everybody afterwards too, I think has to mean something too, that they weren't just sort of left to their own devices to, go start auditioning in Hollywood. They were encouraged to create their own projects, which is something you've done, throughout your whole career, is sort of empower people to write their own stuff and create their own stuff.
Well, I just seen that happen a bunch of times, right? So like I interviewed Shandling when I was a kid, and this is before he did any TV, but he was talking about what he wanted to do on TV. And he had a vision of like doing a show where he played kind of a version of himself, and that became It's Gary Shandling's Show. And then I remember when Jim Carrey was trying to figure out how to get his career going, and him and Tom Shadyac found a script, Ace Ventura, and they rewrote it, and that's how he broke. And then Sandler and Tim Hurley, he wrote Billy Madison, and I had just seen all these people create their careers by sitting down at the computer and writing a screenplay. Some people saying, hey, I think I could direct the next one. Like Steve Brill's first directing after writing The Mighty Ducks was Heavyweights. And Stiller, after we did the sketch show, did Reality Bites. So there was a lot of that happening. So when we did Freaks and Geeks, to me, it felt natural to say, you don't have to just act in this. Do you have ideas for TV shows? Do you have ideas for movies? And also, I mean, Jason always tells this story where I said to him, you're kind of a weird guy. I think you're going to need to write it for yourself to show people what you can do. But I meant that because that's what I saw Jim Carrey and Sandler do, is they had to create a script to make the industry understand what their talents were. Because there wasn't going to be a script laying around that perfectly captured what they were capable of. But those people did the work. Jason Segel sat down and wrote Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And it was the first screenplay he ever wrote. It was incredible. And Seth and Evan sat down and, they were writing Superbad since they were 14 years old. So only from like their massive efforts did any of those things get accomplished.
Yeah. And so many of the films that you write about in the book that did go on to be big hits are these wholly original ideas, which I think has become a lot harder to pull off in the Hollywood system right now, where everything sort of needs to be based on something else or some sort of IP. You've worked with, I think, all of the major studios and platforms at this point. Now we're seeing this kind of concerning consolidation with Netflix wanting to buy Warner Brothers. What impact do you think that kind of stuff is going to have on comedy and the ability to create the sort of original stuff that you've done in your career and that has proven to be successful?
My general theory is it's not like someone has made The Hangover and it didn't do well.
Yeah.
No one's made the great comedy except, like there's not a genius movie that everyone rejected and was too lazy to go to the theater for. right? They just haven't made the comedies because they don't have the DVD money they used to make off of comedies, because that's where they made it, because people love buying those movies and watching them over and over again. So when DVDs went away, comedies suddenly had to make way more money in the theater to be worth the bet. And they always assume they won't work well overseas, which sometimes is true, sometimes not. Where like other genres, they just thought, well, let's lean into horror. Let's lean into this. Maybe it's a better bet for us. But then what happens is you get into a doom loop, which is you haven't broken any new talent. I mean, you might go, they haven't really broken any comedy talent in like 6-7 years. And so suddenly you don't even have the stars to put in a comedy who are approvable and considered box office draws, because you haven't found someone to make the next Ace Ventura or Billy Madison. You don't have a Jim Carrey, you know, or a Kristen Wiig, because you're not taking that risk, you know. And a lot of people went to streaming, and they make all their movies for streaming. So they're not box office draws because they just abandoned the theater. And, you know, for me, I'm like, I like to still, you know, I'll make streaming movies, but like, I'd like to crack the theater and, you know, prove that people still want to go see a comedy that works. You know, my daughter was in that movie with Keke Palmer and SZA. You know,
One of These Days, I think.
And it's hysterical, and people loved it. You know, so I think that proved, like, people, that was a good one, and it did really well.
Meanwhile, you know, you're working with HBO on a lot of these documentaries, and I think as people are hearing this, it will have just been announced that Mel Brooks, the 99-year-old man, which is your next documentary, is premiering on HBO Max in the new year. I got to see the 2-part documentary already and absolutely loved it. As I said, as a comedy nerd, it was right up my alley. Can you talk about putting that one together? I mean, you feels like you set out to discover something new behind this public persona of Mel Brooks, who everyone, you know, has known for a long time. And he has a very, he's a character in an outward facing way, but I think you try to get to something below the surface as well a little bit in this film.
Well, you're the first person to have seen it. Like, literally, I think you're the first person I've spoken to outside of like the people making it who have seen it. So I'm glad that you liked it. I think, you know, the intention was to do a movie with Mel Brooks that was very personal. There had been some documentaries before which talked a lot about his career, but Mel didn't get into his feelings about his life. And I thought, I wonder if I could get a reflective Mel Brooks. And so we, you know, sat down and did about 10 hours of interviews, and he's very, very sharp. I mean, I can't remember anything or anyone's name. He never is like reaching for a name or forgetting a story. You know, he couldn't have a better memory for his life. But I tried to get him, you know, to talk about, you know, his relationship with Carl Reiner and what was that about and why were they so close? And, you know, to talk about Anne Bancroft and what she meant to him and you know, about their love and their romance and her support of him. And, you know, this is a guy who was in World War II and was traumatized by it. He grew up during the Depression. And so, he has a lot to say about how that informed his creativity, because he did have this career where he did go after power. And if you watch movies like The Producers and Blazing Saddles and History of the World, you know, he's making fun of, you know, the people that abuse the citizenry. You know, he's attacking authoritarianism. I mean, a lot of it is very applicable to what we're seeing right now. I mean, he really was the first person to just go so hard against the Nazis. And so we get into these really interesting conversations about what his intentions were for all of that work.
Was there something you felt like you really learned about him that you didn't know before going into it?
You know, he talked a lot about just how scared he was early in his career and how insecure, you know, because when he got a job working for Sid Caesar at Your Show of Shows, he was buddies with Sid Caesar. So Sid Caesar paid him out of his own pocket to just be around. He wasn't even a credited writer in the beginning. And he really felt insecure, like he was going to be found out, like he was a fraud. And he just talked about like getting sick and vomiting from just nervousness. And he's working with the greatest writers of all time, like Larry Gelbart. And and that he went to therapy to try to deal with this paralysis he had. And he said to the therapist, I'm just so having kind of like I'm a fraud, and the therapist said, ask for a raise. and he goes in and he asks for a raise, and the producer's like, no.
Yeah.
And so he says to Sid Caesar, I'm so depressed. I'm not credited on the show. I'm trying to get paid like the other writers. And then Sid Caesar went to the producer and said, give him the credit and give him the money, because if you don't, I'm going to give him the money and I'm not going to be happy about it. And Sid Caesar stood up for him and got him the gig, like the official gig.
Yeah.
And just stories like that, just about the man and the struggles, he went through to become that person, to get in a place where he could do daring work. And that, it took decades.
Yeah. I mean, and even, thinking about the producers along the lines of what we were talking about with these movies that don't necessarily hit with an audience when they come out. I mean, that was one that we think of as, one of the greatest, if not the greatest comedy film of all time. And it was not an instant hit with audiences either.
Yeah. And mixed reviews. And that's always just a good thing to know, that, when you do interesting work, sometimes you take the hit for it, and then, people are inspired by it. And then sometimes it's rediscovered. Sometimes it's not. But yeah, that was a movie that, he said he went with his family to see it. And there was literally like no one in this 1,000-seat theater. And they all thought, oh no, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that movie, the satire of that movie is so daring. And I think the same for Blazing Saddles, which you explore a lot in the film as well. Do you feel like there's enough of that happening now, comedy being used to take on powerful forces in the government or things like that?
Well, we hope, that people continue to find ways to do that. The dynamics of it are so fascinating. Stephen Colbert, is suddenly forced to end his show next year. But at the same time, South Park couldn't go harder against the administration. And it's the same company, and they've somehow been grandfathered in because they generate so much money. And it's the one thing that Trump never talks about out loud.
It's crazy, right?
And it's also the one show Republicans watch, because they've always attacked the left and the right. So in a lot of ways, it's very important, because I think it's being seen by people who might look at it and go, yeah, they're going at him hard, but some of this makes sense. What they're making fun of and what the kind of corruption that they're pointing out. Mm-hmm. So, you hope that there's not so much consolidation of all these companies that one by one, they don't remove all the voices that speak truth to power, because, we need that. But, it is a little scary because it's algorithms, and people can be, quietly diminished on these platforms. I'm always seeing on platforms like satirists or people who make these kind of incredible, hilarious political cartoons. And they do talk about some of them, like they realize oh, no one's seeing this. Yeah. And a lot of that is invisible to us, how that happens.
Yeah. Well, I think it's encouraging at least that both Jon Stewart and Jimmy Kimmel have now extended their contracts, at least by a year, I think. So they're not going anywhere quite yet. Because there was a moment there where it felt like they all might go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, the country basically stood up and said we really don't want you to do that. And that was going to lead to a much larger, round of protests. But the thing to be concerned about is, sometimes just like they'll let there be one liberal on one talk show on Fox so they can say they have the point of view, that it's a very managed amount of talk of resistance.
Why do you think Trump doesn't go after South Park the way he goes after all of the late night hosts? Is it not on his radar? Is nobody telling him about it? You think he knows about it, but is too sort of chastened to say anything?
Who knows? Maybe they have a secret plan of what they're going to do to South Park. I mean, I really don't know. I'm surely someone just said, you're not going to win that one.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're not sitting in a room going, what do we do? But the fact that he's silent about it is interesting, because you always wonder, like, why does he speak out? And does he even write any of these Truth Social posts?
Yeah. I don't know.
So who's the person that's like, don't mess with South Park? I mean, one day we'll probably find out about why, when those things aired, they just said, be silent. And the truth is, you should be silent, because the second you complain about it, 10 times more people watch it. So it might be that they know how accurate this criticism is, and they really don't want more people to know about it.
Yeah, it feels more dangerous than the jokes that are happening in the late night monologues, which are kind of, I mean, they can be great, but they're kind of the same night to night, and there's a theme to it. But South Park is really pushing the envelope in ways that I don't think anyone could have imagined going into this season. Yeah,
and it's very sophisticated, and it is about corruption.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about whatever, the Satan and all those jokes, but the show has been about crony capitalism and a government that's not concerned about working people.
Yeah. Going back to sort of Mel Brooks and these documentaries that you've been making about comedians, you've done George Carlin and Gary Shandling. Do you ever think about what the film about you will look like, maybe when you're 99 years old?
I don't. I mean, some people have asked me about doing something like that, and I'm always like, no. I want everyone else to let me do it about them. But if anyone ever asks me, I'm like, no, there's nothing interesting there. It's just a workaholic nerd. There's no great story there. Once I let this man in France make a documentary about me, but you have to really be French to find it.
Really?
But that's like 10 years ago. I just thought it would be cool to have a documentary where everyone's talking French. The narrator's in French, and it just makes me seem fancy. Makes me seem like, if people are talking in another language about you, then clearly you're doing something well.
Well, I know you have more documentaries coming as well. I just saw the Maria Bamford one got into Sundance. Congrats on that.
Yes, Paralyzed by Hope, the Maria Bamford story. Me and Neil Berkeley, who made the Gilbert Gottfried documentary, have been following her around for about 3 years. And,
incredible.
She's one of the great stand-up comedians of all time, and is just a real brave, incredibly imaginative comic force. And it just came out so well, and I just think she's the best. So I'm very excited for people to see that.
And what's the status of the Norm Macdonald one? I know you've been working on that as well.
That is going to be out next year on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
And it's, I think, going to be called The Norm Macdonald Wormhole. And it's I think, a really great way to experience Norm. We didn't interview anyone. It's just a collage of Norm.
Oh, wow.
And, he did so many interviews, and there was endless amounts of the best jokes you've ever heard. When you start lining it up, you realize how brilliant he was, because there was so much material that was the best thing you've ever seen. So that should be out later in the year.
Yeah, I'm sad that I never got to have him on this podcast, but I did get to interview him once on the phone while he was on a golf course.
Yeah.
And just telling me OJ stories and SNL, and it was that was definitely a highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I used to write jokes with him for Roseanne's stand-up act.
Wow.
When he first moved to Los Angeles. And very quickly, Roseanne realized he was the funniest person ever and hired him to be on the TV show Roseanne. And then just a few months later, he got hired away to be on Saturday Night Live.
Do you think you'll direct a comedy feature film again anytime soon? I
think so. I've been writing a movie with Glenn Powell, a country music comedy that we're looking to do in the spring, and that all seems like it's happening. So hopefully in about a year that'll come out. Are
we moving to This Is 70 yet, or what's the status? I know it was This Is 60. This is 50. I guess you're still under 60, right?
I'm still under 60. It can be any number. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be. People think it needs to be in tens. It could be anything. But when you get older, I say this in my stand-up, all your jokes become about decay. All your jokes are like, don't you hate when you get diverticulitis? And so sometimes it's less fun to do it. But it's funny. My daughter, Maud, directed a movie called Poetic License that stars Leslie and Cooper Hoffman and Andrew Barth Feldman. And it's coming out in May. And it's like an empty nesting, nervous breakdown comedy, and it's really sweet and really, really funny. In a lot of ways, that feels like another tale, but from Maud's perspective. And I'm excited for people to see that.
Hey guys, I'm excited to tell you about Inside Trump's Head, a new podcast from The Daily Beast, hosted by Trump biographer Michael Wolff and the Beast's resident provocateur Joanna Coles. 3 times a week, Michael and Joanna unpack what's really going on inside the mind of the world's most unpredictable man, Donald Trump, bringing you unflinching access and insight you won't find anywhere else. If you've ever wondered what the hell is Trump thinking and who hasn't, you don't want to miss these conversations. Subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on YouTube and the next day on your favorite podcast platforms. So before we get out of here, we do have our segment called The First Laugh, which you've answered some of these questions before, but we're going to try to run through some of them now because this is our final episode. Can you start with the first piece of comedy that you remember making you laugh really hard as a kid growing up?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that really made me laugh was the Marx Brothers. I just loved those movies. I loved them terrorizing people in tuxedos. I wasn't even sure at the time why I liked it so much, but it was just the anarchy of it, just attacking the popular people. I mean, in a way, every Marx Brothers movie felt like it took place at Mar-a-Lago. And they were just beating up on everybody who was abusing them.
What about the first time that you knew that you were funny, that you could make other people laugh?
I think I wanted to be funny way more than I was as a little kid. So I don't even remember getting any well-earned laughs, but I certainly was obnoxious with the teachers. I was the kid who would yell out the thing that you shouldn't say. And I was always willing to get in trouble for it to get a laugh. But looking back, I don't think any of it was witty. I don't think we would, if we heard what I said, none of it would be something I would be proud of.
When you think about that very first time you got up on stage to perform stand-up, what comes to mind and sort of the experience of it?
I look back now and I just can't believe I did it because I was so terrified. I was 17 years old. Chuckles Comedy Club in Mineola. Joel Bolster was the MC. Half the comedians were just almost insane people. Like, it's not like there were a lot of credible people getting up. Those open mics were nasty. And I had almost no jokes. I can't even believe I did it. And I remember I would always say to the crowd at the end, I think the great Jerry Lewis said, you learn nothing about how to be funny by getting laughs. You only learn by not getting laughs. So thank you for the college education you've given me tonight. And then I would get that laugh and I could get off stage after bombing for 5 minutes.
Do you have a first joke that you wrote that you felt really good about that worked on stage and you were like, this is solid. I can get a laugh with this?
Well, that joke used to get a laugh. And I remember I used to have a joke where I talked about step relatives and how the best part is that you could have sex with them. And how my Thanksgiving was like a singles bar. And I don't know, that was as witty as I got at 17.
You write in your book about your love of talk shows and late night shows and all that. And I have the same love. What do you remember about the very first time you got to be a guest on a late night show?
I'm trying to think what the first one was. I did Conan, who I had met when he wrote for Saturday Night Live when Adam was there. And I think he was one of the first people to have me on. But maybe before that, I did Dennis Miller. That was the first one, was the Dennis Miller show. And I remember I was on with the band live from Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that band Live? They had that album Throwing Copper. And Dennis had me on a few times doing stand-up. I didn't do panel with him. And he was always a great supporter. One of my first jobs is he hosted a pre-game show on HBO for Paul Simon live in Central Park.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like a kind of a half hour, set up for the show with a lot of Paul Simon jokes. And the one joke I remember that we had him say was, "We are about to see Paul Simon perform with the 28 musicians and singers from around the world that it took to replace art."
That's great. When you look back at your career, is there something that you said no to at the time that you now think, ooh, maybe I should have said yes in that case?
I mean, there were moments where people offered me things and I just wasn't sure if I could do it. So I would say no because I'm like, I don't know if I know how to do it. I remember like very early on, Adam Sandler asked me if I wanted to direct Big Daddy. And I had just had a child, but it was about Adam interacting, with a kid. And I remember reading it and thinking to myself, I don't know how a person talks to a child because I haven't hung out with like a 6 or 7 year old since I was 6 or 7.
So maybe in a few years after that, you would have been more ready to do it.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I know what's funny about this because I don't have the experience of it. And I was always really afraid of letting down friends. Like if someone was offering me an opportunity, I would never take it unless I was sure I would come through. Cause the guilt of like ruining someone's movie really scared me. My ambition never was bigger than that fear of, can you handle this?
The flip side of that question is there something you said yes to that now you kind of wish you'd said no to?
Something I said yes to, I should have said, no, I don't think so. I mean, there's nothing where I go like, oh, what a nightmare. And how did you shouldn't have done that. I mean, because I always try to do things with people I like and projects that I think can be really cool and special. I've never done anything for a career reason or a financial reason. It's always like, oh my God, it would be so fun to work with these people, so it's always from a place of a lot of passion. And even when it doesn't work out, like, I'm glad I gave it a try. It's never like, well, I'll do this one for the money. Oh man, it didn't work. Like, I never could do that because I don't think I can do a good job unless I'm super excited. I don't think I think it'll be a disaster if I don't kind of get it and I'm just there for a different reason.
Yeah, I hear that.
Although I can tell you something I turned down that I regret. I never would guest direct on TV shows.
Oh, really? Why not?
I'm not sure. Like, they kept asking me to direct episodes of The Office because we had just done The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Anchorman.
Yeah, that seems like that would be very fun.
And in my head, I just thought, I don't know. The Office is great. They don't need me to do it. Like, whoever's doing it now is doing it the way it should be done. So I'm only doing it for my own amusement.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm better than who's doing it because the person who's doing it is kicking ass. And
you don't want to do it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, the same thing at Girls. The whole time we did Girls, I never directed an episode because
that's kind of crazy.
All those directors like Jesse Peretz and Richard Shepard, like, it was perfect. So it was. I like to kind of jump in when I think I have something to offer that someone there doesn't have.
Yeah, it takes discipline, I think, right? If turning stuff like that down.
Like, I knew I could direct crashing episodes in a fun way and Freaks and Geeks and Love. Like, oh yeah, I think I have a little take on this that maybe someone wouldn't do. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times when you're a guest director, you're just trying not to mess up their show. Yeah. Yeah. But that was probably wrong. Maybe I would have found a little wrinkle in it. Yeah. But I get scared of like letting everyone down. Like, oh God, what the worst episode of The Office is? The one Judd did.
We've already talked about how many of your comedy heroes you've met both when you were a teenager and then, all the way up until, working with Mel Brooks on this film. Do you have a story that really stands out in your mind about the first time you met one of your really big comedy heroes, and what it was like to meet them, whether it went well or didn't go as expected, or just something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I remember first meeting Mel. I got asked to do some like Q&As for Carl Reiner. Like Carl Reiner would have a book and ask me to interview him and Mel to promote the book. And, once someone took me to a lunch with them, and it was just really special to spend time with them in like a social way. But then, they would write books and have events or need someone to interview them on Sirius Radio. And I would always say yes to anything that Carl and Mel needed. And then, then you would just look for an excuse to get around Mel. And so like once me and Bill Hader went to his office just to like chat and admire him. And it was really fun. And then at the end, Mel Brooks goes, "Let's do this again, but not soon." And then as we walked away, we're like in the parking lot. Suddenly he's outside and he's just screaming from like 100 yards away, "Get the fuck out of here!" That's what you want out of Mel.
Yeah. He's always trying to get the laugh, no matter what. So on this new podcast that we're launching, the Obsessed podcast, we have a segment called Unmissable, where we're talking about what is unmissable in pop culture right now. If listeners could only watch one thing you've made, what do you think it should be? What's the one project that you would tell people to watch?
That's a good question. If they could only watch one thing, I guess I probably would say Freaks and Geeks. Because when we made Freaks and Geeks, when it was over, I thought, at least one thing came out exactly right. Yeah. Like, this is what it feels like to be proud of what it became. And, working with Paul and that cast and Jake and seeing that it doesn't go away. There's so much in the culture, right? There's a new TV show like every 2 days. So it's always shocking when you go, that one came out 26 years ago, but people watch it as much as they're watching new shows right now. Like, that's not going anywhere. And that's an accomplishment I think we're all really proud of, that there's a timelessness to it and a humanity to it. And what it's talking about hasn't changed, even though the world's changed and the internet and social media. But the feelings of those kids are still something that modern kids connect with. And so that's probably the one that would be the unmissable one. Yeah,
I would say if anyone out there has not watched Freaks and Geeks or is waiting for some reason, definitely check it out.
And maybe the Gary Shandling documentary on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
Is just, for a comedy fan, it just says a lot about life and comedy and spirituality. And I feel like it was very almost guided by Gary to just express a lot of the ideas that were important to him.
Is there any project that you've done that you think should be missed?
It should be missed. I don't know. I definitely had a Tonight Show that I bombed pretty hard. Where I was on the Tonight Show once with Robin Williams, and I brought on this collage I had made in junior high school of everything I was interested in. So it had like motorcycles and The Who and Steve Martin, but in the center was Robin Williams. And so I brought it on because he was the other guest to show him, but I also thought he would just make fun of it because it was so dumb what I had in it. But he was so polite that he didn't make fun of it. He was just like, "Oh, that's very sweet." And I hadn't written enough material for the panel because I'm like, well, Robin Williams is going to talk about this for 5 minutes. And then he just went, "Very nice." And he just didn't say a word. And then I had like a semi-bomb where like when it ended, I thought to myself, I think Jay's never going to have me back on this show again. And then he did. I've never watched it, but that's one maybe that we can
it could be missed.
Not check in on.
The last question we ask on the show, is there a story or memory from your career that makes you laugh now, but really was not funny when it happened?
That's like so much of it, right? Like so much is funny now. I mean, I always think about like getting canceled, like those moments when you're canceled and you're like on the phone. And so, what usually happens is someone from the network calls you who's like the low level person, and they tell you, because they're the one that's got to like catch the strays when you freak out. Yeah. And then an hour later, the head of the network calls once you've adjusted.
Calmed down a little bit.
Exactly. So you're having this like, what the fuck conversation. And then an hour later, the head of the network calls. And by then you've realized, well, I can't yell at that person because I kind of need them to give me another job at some point. And so you have your tail between your legs and like, I just really feel like we deserved another chance. I mean, I understand the ratings weren't what you wanted them to be, but but if we had more time and better marketing, I think maybe we could have succeeded. But anyway, hopefully I'll think of something else and then I'll tell you about it. It's the most shameful moment of your life. You can't express your rage. You still have to kiss ass, even as your career is falling apart.
But at least you can laugh about it now.
And then years later, you can laugh about it. I used to always say, like, I feel like whenever I'm being canceled, that whoever is calling me on speakerphone, and there's like 8 other executives in the room laughing as I'm kind of groveling and crying.
Well, Judd, thank you so much for coming back and doing this. Your support of this show has been so great over the years, and I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that we could do it one more time.
Well, thank you so much for making the show, because it's awesome. I hope it's always up there. I hope it doesn't disappear.
Yeah, the whole archive will be available for free. So anyone who has not listened to our now 315 episodes, it'll take a lot of time to go through it, but I encourage it.
It's the history of comedy. It's you have to keep it out there. The one with Patton was amazing last week.
Oh, thank you, Judd.
It's so good. But congratulations, it's a big accomplishment. And next time I'm on, I guess we'll talk about some of my other interests like dance.
Yeah, dance.
Opera, other obsessions that I have.
Comedy Nerd is available now, and you can get it anywhere you get books. We'll put a link to purchase it in the description for this episode. It's so great, makes such a great gift for Hanukkah especially. The Mel Brooks documentary is coming in January, so people should definitely check that out as well. I'm very honored to be one of the first to get to see it, and congrats, Judd, on everything, as always.
Thank you very much. Sail on, young man.
All right. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.